Hello dear students, welcome to the software engineering lecture. I am Nikhil Govil, assistant professor at the Department of Computer Engineering and Applications. Today's broad topic is requirement documentation. Let's have a look on requirement documentation. Requirement documentation is very important activity after the requirements elicitation and analysis. This is the way to present requirements in a consistent format. It is also known as Software Requirement Specifications or SRS. The SRS is a specification for a particular software product, program, or set of programs that performs certain functions in a specific environment. By this ground, we can say that it serves a number of purposes depending on who is writing it. By using SRS, we can say that it increases customer satisfaction level. As far as the nature of the SRS includes, then the basic issues that SRS writer shall addresses are the following. Number first, functionality, which means what the software is supposed to do. Number second, external interfaces. That means how does the software interact with people, the system's hardware, and other softwares. Number third, performance. That means what is the speed, availability, response time, recovery time, etc. of various software functions. At number 4, attributes. That includes what are the considerations for portability, correctness, maintainability, security, reliability, etc. And finally, number 5, design constraints imposed on an implementation. That means are there any required standards in effect, implementation language, policies for database integrity, resource limits, operating environments, etc. Apart from the nature of the SRS, a good SRS must have some characteristics as well. The basic characteristics are number first, correct, which means the SRS is correct if and only if every requirement stated therein is one that the software shall meet. Second characteristic is unambiguous. That means the SRS is unambiguous if and only if every requirement stated therein has only one interpretation. Each sentence in the SRS should have the unique interpretation. Third attribute is completeness, or simply we can say complete. The SRS is complete if and only if it includes the following elements, such as number first, we can say all significant requirements, whether relating to functionality, performance, design constraints, attributes, or external interfaces. As well as at the second point, we can say definition of their responses of the software to all realizable classes of input data. And finally, full labels and references to all figures, tables, and diagrams in the SRS and definition of all terms and units of measure. Fourth characteristic of SRS is consistency. That means the SRS is consistent if and only if no subset of individual requirements described in it conflicts. Additionally, some more characteristics are there for good include ranked for importance and or stability. That means the SRS is ranked for importance and or stability if each requirement in it has an identifier to indicate either the importance or stability of that particular requirement. Next point is verifiable. That means simply means the SRS is verifiable if and only if every requirement stated therein is verifiable. A requirement is verifiable if and only if there exist some finite cost effective processes with which a person or machine can check that the software meets the requirements. Next point may be modifiable. The SRS may be called modifiable if and only if its structure and style are such that any changes to the requirements can be made easily, completely, and consistently while retaining the structure and style. And finally, one more point is there, that is traceable. That means the SRS is traceable if the origin of each of the requirements is clear and if it facilitates the referencing of each requirement in future development or enhancement documentation. So all these 8 points includes the characteristics of a good SRS. Next come organization of the SRS. The Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineer, or we can say IEEE, has published guidelines and standards to organize an SRS document. Different projects may require their requirements to be organized differently. That is, there is no one method that is suitable for all projects. It provides different ways of structuring the SRS. The first two sections of the SRS are the same in all of them. The specific tailoring occurs in section 3, that is entitled as specific requirements. The general organization of the SRS may be shown as follows. So there are some points in the organization of SRS. The major points include introduction, which means the following subsections of the software requirement specification document should provide an overview of the entire SRS. And the subpoints may be purpose, scope, definition, acronyms and abbreviations, references, and overview. And the second point, that is the overall description. In this point, we can mention as it describes the general factors that affect the product and its requirements. This section does not state specific requirements. Instead, it provides a background for these requirements. Such are defined in section 3 and makes them easier to understand. The subpoints may include as product perspective, product functions, user characteristics, constraints, assumption and dependency, and a portion of requirements. Next may include specific requirements. This section contains all the software requirements at a level of detail sufficient to enable designers to design a system to satisfy those requirements and testers to test that the system satisfies those requirements. Throughout this section, every stated requirement should be extremely serviceable by users, operators, or both external system. In this category, some major subsystems are external interfaces, functions, performance requirements, logical database requirements, design constraints, software system attributes, organizing the specific requirements, and additional comments. Fourth point may include change management process. It identifies the change management process to be used to identify, log, evaluate, and update the SRS to reflect changes in project scope and requirements. The fifth point includes document approval. It identifies the approvers of the SRS document. Approver's name, signature, and date should be used. And finally, the sixth point is supporting information. The supporting information makes the SRS easier to use. It may include table of contents, index, and appendices. So this is all about the organization of SRS. For this lecture, I have used some of the popular books as reference that includes K.K. Agrawal and Yogesh Singh, Software Engineering book. Second book is authored by Roger S. Pressman. Third book authored by Professor Rajiv Mall. And finally, another software engineering book authored by Pankaj Jalot. So this is all for today's lecture.